Well, welcome everybody. Last topic is competition training. Let me see. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, creating a competition plan is a really complex topic that I could probably talk about for hours. So it was really tough for me to limit this to 20 minutes. See how far we can get. If you have any questions, you can always write in the chat or email me directly. I will be missing a lot of points because, like I said, I only have 20 to 30 minutes to talk about competition training plans. So if you're missing anything, let me know. This is kind of what I want to go through. First, the basics of a competition planning training plan. Then, obviously, demands and requirements of the competition that are totally different. If you want to prepare somebody for a triathlon or a marathon or a Hyrox competition or an OCR race or a CrossFit competition, you have totally different requirements to the athlete. Then I will talk about testing, periodization of training. Then some facts that I think a good coach needs to have. A little bit about heart rate based training, recovery, tapering, and at the end, a little bit about Hyrox. So when you think about the basics of a competition programming, you have to admit, and every coach has to look at himself or herself. It's not for every coach because it's really complex and it's a very special type of programming because you have to get this athlete fit and ready to a certain date. So the performance and the peak of training has to be on point, which is not an easy thing to do. And the more elite the athletes are you're working with, the littler the little tweaks you have to make in training to get them better or get the last 2 or 3 seconds out of a performance. So the more elite the athletes are you working with, the harder it is for a coach to know what to change or what to do or what to adapt to get the performance you want in the end. So what I mean by this, it has to fit your coaching skills and knowledge, and I think it's totally okay to agree to yourself that you're not a coach that's made for training elite athletes or made for training athletes that are getting ready for a competition. On the other hand, I don't see any reason for any coach that has a basic knowledge to get those skills and learn and work on those skills to eventually be that type of coach. And obviously, it's a big difference on what type of athletes you're working with. So if you're preparing somebody for, let's say, a Hyrox virtual competition, it's a totally different way of working with preparing a CrossFit athlete for the CrossFit Games or for a sanctional event, or let's say for OCR final race, where you already have athletes that pretty much know what to do, but expect from you as a coach to make little tiny changes to get something out of their performance that they can't do by themselves. So what I mean by that, look at yourself, look what you're specialized in. And if you think you have the basic skills and knowledge, just work on yourself to be that coach you eventually want to be. Try to talk to athletes to get them ready for competitions. And it's a lot of trial and error. I used to train CrossFit athletes. They're preparing for regionals, and it's really tough because they think they know more than the coach, and you have to do a lot of fights with them because you think this is the best way to do it, and the athlete thinks that's the best way to do, because it takes a lot of trust from the coach to the athlete, but the other way around as well. The next point is that don't hesitate to get help from specialists, which means is if you ask me now, if I could, train somebody for a marathon, and I've been training people in all kinds of different sections, I would have to admit to myself that I'm not an expert in running and preparing somebody for a marathon. So if you have a client asking you, hey, can you, help me get ready for a marathon, I would always look to get some input from specialists, from marathon races, from coaches, to just look out for some help, get some tips. And by that, I don't mean just use Google and you find sources that you can't really rely on and adapt that to your clients, because it might be total crap. So don't hesitate to get help, because being a coach that's preparing athletes for competition is really something special. And then testing, programming, and peak of performance has to be on point. That's the biggest challenge. And periodization, so the way you structure the training up until the competition, is key. So let me see if we can move this. First of all, you have to see what are the requirements of the competition. What do I need to get my athlete ready for? Is it strength? Is it endurance? Is it a mix? So that's obviously really important. The next thing is, what are the capabilities of my athlete? So what is he or her capable of? What are his or her strengths, and what's even more important, what are his or her weaknesses? Because if you have athletes that are already good, it's easy to work on stuff that they're already good at, but it's really tough to work on things that they're not good at. And that's the things you should tackle in the beginning. But by knowing this, or to get to know the strength and the weaknesses, you need to do some testing and find out, what do I actually need to work on with him or her to make him better, and where he needs to get better. And it says, what I mean is, you have to measure in the beginning, the current capability. So testing is mandatory to get the current status of training. And obviously, it's not only useful to test in the beginning of a training program and at the end, but also in the middle of it, because you have to make sure everything's going in the right direction, because you think everything's going in the right direction, but it's only a gut feeling. And I'm really a big fan of data and collecting data from athletes to check yourself and check him if the program you've been putting together is actually working. And if it's not working, you have to make some adaptations, because that's also a requirement of a good coach to realize that something you might have planned for this athlete is not really working. And you will only find out if you test him or her during the training plan, to see if everything's going in the right direction. And then, like I said, adapt the training programs to the results you get during the testing. And by collecting data, it means collecting performance data like running times, strength numbers, the heart rate, the development of heart rate under different conditions, the amount of recovery, the amount of sleep, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all something that a coach has to look out for to get the most out of your program and the most out of the athletes you're working with. Again, all this has a lot of levels. This could be from being an Olympic athlete down to somebody attending a local competition at a functional gym that you want to get him or her ready for. But I think the basic work is pretty much the same. Maybe not as detailed as with pro athletes, but if anybody asks you and be like, look, I want to attend this local competition and I want to get better and I want to do good, you have to measure or you have to get some data out of this athlete to know where to start. I think that's crucial. So how do I get this smaller so I can read my own presentation? Periodization, you have a macro cycle. Get this out of the way. Okay, here we go. So macro cycle, this is pretty much something you only look at if you're working with a client year round, and this client is a competitor and he has multiple events within a year. And you have to look at the season as a whole and be like, he has a competition in February, he has a competition in June, he has a competition in October, and then kind of plan the year and then break this year down into mesocycles, which is just a particular training block within that season, which could be a strength phase, an endurance phase, whatever. And then you have the microcycle, which is, like it says here, the smallest unit within the mesocycle, which could be just 1 week of training that you're focusing on. And then you have the, I can pronounce this right, the preparatory phase, where you focus on sport-specific training with less time building strength and cardio endurance. So it's not about adapting or gaining more strength or getting better at endurance. It's more about getting this athlete to working out at an intensity level that you want to see in the competition, to kind of get his mental stage ready. And then you have the competitive phase, which is, dedicated to maintaining specific performance, which is strength and anaerobic conditioning or other effects that you want to see within your athlete. So periodization can be done for whole, whatever your athlete is looking at. But this topic is creating competition training plan, and competition to me is always a certain date where you have to perform and where you have to be good at. Or you want your athlete to have the best performance. So you have to do some kind of periodization and make sure you do the right things at the right time and have the athlete ready when it counts. Here's some things I think that are really important to be a good competition coach. First of all, you need a holistic approach. Back in the days when you look at, I'm a former basketball player, and I used to have really old school Russian trainers in the beginning, and they only care about your performance on the court or on the track. They don't really care what else is going on in your life. I think nowadays coaches have to change their approach, see, what's the family situation, how's their nutrition, how's their sleep routine. I think that's really important if you want to program a training program for a competitor. Obviously find the right mix of intensity, volume, and recovery, because some coaches are all about intensity and volume and volume and volume. But it's not for every athlete the right thing to do. And like I said before, he has to know the daily routines of an athlete, his family situation. So he might be working in shift if he's not a professional. He might have 4 kids, which is a complicated situation, which means he doesn't have the time to train 5 times a week. So if you want to be a professional coach, you have to know all this stuff to design a training program that fits to this athlete. Know when to increase pressure and when to hold back. This is a lot about, the next point, mental stages. There's athletes are not machines, they're human beings, and some are totally different than others, and some need permanent pressure, and some athletes need coaches to kind of lay off and relax a little bit when they talk to them. So that's something a good coach needs to understand. And also, and that's really important, on competition day, most athletes bring their coach and have the right coaching cues and give the athlete a feeling that the coach knows what to do in certain situations, especially if things go bad in a competition. You need the right coaching cues to get the athlete back on track. I think that's to me, these are the key facts. Maybe I forgot 1 or 2, maybe you have some more. But I think if you match these 6 points, I think you're pretty good at what you're doing. I think what's underestimated for a lot of coaches is that, physical and mental recovery are key to competition training. The athletes I trained, and the more elite athletes are, they get a lot smarter the way they train. So especially coming from a CrossFit background, and you see amateur CrossFitters getting ready for competitions or local throwdowns, what they do is they train 2 to 3 times a day, and they get a feeling that once they rest one day, they lose their gains, or they lose focus. But and again, it comes back to testing. Recovery is a big point of competition training, because if you train at a high volume with really high-end intensity, you need to recover. You need to recover big time to get ready. And like I said here, sometimes less is more. I had athletes that I worked with that I trained 5 to 6 times a week, and we didn't really get results. And then all of a sudden, we scaled it down to 3 to 4 times a week, where the athletes had the feeling it's not enough training. And all of a sudden, we were getting way better results in his or her performance. So that's also something a good coach needs to have, is get a feeling of how much recovery does my athlete need? And, of course, add some tools like massages, meditation, sleep routines, good nutrition, and stuff like that. So again, for a lot of coaches, always look out for enough recovery and don't overload your athletes, even though they feel like it's the best thing to do. But sometimes that's the most hardest thing to do as a coach, is convince your athletes that getting enough rest and enough recovery will help in the long run. Also with competitions, there's something called tapering, a certain way of keeping up in your training. And the way most, at least CrossFit athletes or fitness athletes that get ready for a competition, or like a Hyrox competition, is that 2 to 3 weeks before a competition, athletes take out the volume of the training, or the coaches take out the volume, split up their training in little shorter sessions, but go at a competition intensity with following a longer recovery phases. So it's not about getting major gains. It's not about getting your strength up, or working on your endurance. It's about a mental preparation for the competition. So let's say for a Hyrox competition where you have to do running in a mix with a functional movement, you take 2 or 3 movements out of that competition, do that in one training session that, normally a training session might have lasted 60 to 90 minutes. And all of a sudden you only do 30 to 45 minutes, but a really high intensity, just like a competition day. And then you have maybe 1 or 2 days a rest afterwards, and then do the same type of intensity again, but with a different type of workout. Because a big mistake a lot of athletes do before a competition, they think they have to train until 2 or 3 days before the competition with a really high intensity and high volume to mentally feel ready. But competition day is totally different game. You need your 100%. So recovery and a good way of tapering before a competition is really key to be ready, to be rested, to be recovered, but be mentally ready to go all out. And if you take certain parts of a competition and train them for 2 or 3 weeks at a high intensity, it gives an athlete mentally a really good feeling, because he feels good about this station, let's say at a Hyrox event, about the ski erg, about the rowing, about the burpee broad jumps, because you only take that certain section and work on it. And then he feels ready on competition day and not scared or intimidated, or not sure or secure about certain parts of the competition. He knows he can do it. He knows what intensity to do. So that's something I really think makes totally sense in a competition training plan. Something I skipped is heart rate based training, and this is like I said at the beginning, something we could talk about forever. But to me, if you work with athletes that are preparing for a competition, no matter what type of competition it is, I think, no, I'm 100% convinced you need to monitor their heart rate to give them the most information you can get, because it's a reliable indicator of exercise intensity. You get a live feedback how hard your athlete is working. You get to know your athlete's body, and the athlete gets to know his or her body inside out, because even though he feels he doesn't have anything left in the tank, you can tell him by the heart rate he's in right now that he does. And what that does is they work out in certain heart rate zones, and they adapt that to the competition. So what you see in a lot of elite competitions like CrossFit or Hyrox, the best athletes always have a heart rate monitor, because they know during the competition, they look at their wrist, they look at their watch, and they know, okay, I'm at 150, 160, 165 heart rate. I can go. I can still stay at this pace, and I'll be able to finish this competition strong. But and the other way around, if they see they get in some kind of some kind of station, let's say the burpee broad jumps in Hyrox, they're at 175, 180 heart rate. They know they have to slow down because that will have an impact on their their performance later in the competition. So to me, it is a mandatory tool for every serious athlete and every serious coach that's coaching competitive athletes to monitor their heart rate during training, but also during the competition, because you can give them live feedback on to work harder or to slow down a little bit to have the effects or the performance you want to see. Already talked about recovery, already talked about tapering. And here's something I want to show you about the Hyrox competition because of the last session. So I want to give you a short introduction of what Hyrox is, if some of you don't know exactly what it is. It's always 1K run in between each station you see here. So you start out with a 1K run, then you do 1,000 meters of ski erg, 1,000-meter run. I won't mention that again. So it's always a 1,000-meter run in between. Then you do 50 meters of sled push, 50 meters of sled pull, 80 meters burpee broad jump, 1,000 meters of rowing, 200-meter farmer's carry, 100-meter lunges, and 100 wall balls. So you can see there's a lot of different things a coach needs to work on with his athlete and see where are actually his strength and where his weaknesses. And, you know, I coached an athlete or started coaching an athlete after he had done a competition, and he did a great job up until the wall balls, but for the last 100 wall balls, it took him 14 minutes just to finish those 100 wall balls. So to me as a coach, that's an indicator, okay, obviously you have to work on those wall balls, but it might not be the only thing to look at. It might be something to look at what happened prior to the wall balls, that he was so tired and fatigued. What do I need to work on? And again, this always goes along with testing and monitoring and retesting and adapting your training to find out where are his weak. Is it really the wall balls, or is it something before? Is it the combination of doing the lunges, the running, and the wall balls, which is all legs? So what I wanted to say is, you know, preparing somebody for a Hyrox competition is totally different than preparing a marathon runner, because then you only have to get him faster on 42K run. But here you have to really look at, you know, where is strength, where is weaknesses, is he strong enough, is he fast enough on the running, is his endurance and conditioning good enough to be able to finish this race in, let's say, sub 70 minutes, which would be pretty elite. Just to give you an example of a Hyrox training plan, and I only want to look at the running on the right side. This one is split up for an athlete that, you know, told me he can only work out 3 times a week. I added an extra session, which is more accessory work, core and mobility. But he did have some issues with running. So the way I split this up is, you know, the first week, he had to run 10 times 400 meters with a 1-minute rest in between, and then do that twice. So he ran 20 times 400 meters. Now you would have athletes that's too much for them for the first session. Again, for this athlete, it was perfect. So so this is not supposed to be 10,000 meter pace. It's more about a 1,000 meter pace. You can see here 10 times 400 meters in 2 rounds. The next running session that you see underneath, I increased the amount of meters that he runs at once. So he's running 800 meters. Again, at a 10,000 meter pace, not at a 1,000 meter pace. So, and again, he does that for 10 times. So we will end up at 8,000 meters. And then the next one, you look at, I increased around the amount of meters again. I had him run 4 times 1,200 meters, have him rest for 3 minutes, and then do that again, 4 times 1,200 meters. And if you look underneath, again, I increased the amount of meters per run to 1,600 meters, 3 times with a 1-minute walk in between, and do that for 2 rounds. So that's just an example of how to increase the intensity, how to increase the duration and the volume of training to reach the goal you wanted to reach. With this athlete, I wanted to improve his running, but with Hyrox, I told you before, it's not only about the running. So the second day of training was more functional movements, different AMRAPs, mostly about 30 to 40-minute workouts in combination with a 200-meter row, a 2,000-meter row, or 2,000-meter run at the end. And the third day would be a strength day to work on, weaknesses as you see: barbell front rack, reverse lunges, pull-ups, dumbbell press, and in combination with sled pull. So kind of get a good mix of leg and upper body strength, but don't underestimate the running. That was my focus. Conditioning was my focus for this athlete because he was strong enough to handle all the workouts like sled push, pull, but he did have some issues with running. So this is mostly everything for me. I'm happy to answer more questions if you want to. See how I can get back here.
While you're doing that, Jacob, Mark Airy, you had a couple of questions. The first one about how often you would test, and another one as well. So do you want to speak first? Don't forget you're muted.
Yeah, I mean, hi, Jacob.
Hi.
Heart rate, I love heart rate training, but with multiple sort of discipline events like yours, it must be really difficult to come up with one heart rate. Have you got a specific heart rate that you formula you use, or would you max them out in the run, so you know what the run heart rate was, and then max them out in the row and the ski erg, or would you just kind of use a maximum heart rate from running and minus, I think the most literature says around about 12 beats, and use that?
Yeah, what I did with some athletes is kind of get a feeling on how they feel with certain heart rates they're working on. And I think what you always see with a combination, let's say, of running and a sled push, you see in our competition, you see athletes dying, you see them dominate the first 2 kilometers of running, and then they get to the sled push, they feel good, they push the sled like crazy. Of course, the lactic acid is coming all out of their body and muscles, but their heart rate goes up to 180, but they try to keep pushing and pushing and pushing the sled. They go back and then they let go of the sled. And the next thing they do, they have the hands on their knees for 45 seconds to 90 seconds because they can't move. So what I try to tell them is, if you stay at a heart rate of between, obviously it's different for each athlete, but between 160, 170 on the sled push, make sure you rest in between the push for 5 to 10 seconds, 5 to 15 seconds. Try to get the heart rate down and push it for another 10 meters, rest for 5 seconds, so you don't get into that red zone. And I think it's really important. The heart rate is really important on the combination of running, where your heart rate is mostly at pretty much the same heart rate with a little ups and downs, but then you get into movements where you have really peaks in your heart rate. And this is what I want to work on Hyrox athletes to be able to how do I say it in English, to be prepared for those peaks and know how far to go in the red zone without losing strength and endurance for the next 5 or 6 workouts. So I think it's really individual if you talk about heart rate training, and I think the athlete needs a certain amount of data, or you need a certain amount of data to know what heart rate this athlete feels comfortable with, and what stage he really gets into the red zone and is about to get crushed in the competition. But if you're working with a new athletes, of course, in the beginning, you have to do some kind of some testing and maybe use some certain formulas to see if this fits to this certain athlete. Yeah, this is my answer to that question.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mark, you also asked about testing.
Yeah, I just wondered how often you would test, but I suppose that would depend on how long the mesocycle was. Would you test at the beginning of each mesocycle and sort of midway and at the end, just to ensure that was working?
Exactly. That would be my approach, to have one in the beginning, one halfway, and then one maybe 3 or 4 weeks before the competition to kind of start the tapering. But you know, sometimes as a coach, you get a gut feeling, or you kind of get a feeling this is not going in the right direction. You see the athlete doing workouts, and yeah, he's doing good at some stuff, but at some stuff you feel like you don't really see any improvement. If you get that feeling, maybe you don't do the whole test battery that you created, but test him on certain things, like this athlete, the training plan I showed you. Maybe just test his running, like how does he increase in the running part of Hyrox, and if he feels comfortable with the rest, I wouldn't need see a need for testing him in that. But I think it's a lot about looking in your athlete's eyes and a gut feeling, and then the need to collect the data. But if you feel fine, if everything's going the way you expected it, and you have a good feeling about it, I would go like beginning, halfway, and then, you know, shortly before the actual competition.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, this I wanted to add, this is a really really specialized way of coaching. So if any of you have never had any contact of preparing an athlete for a competition, don't worry about it, because it's really a niche. It's really something that you need some experience, but experience only comes from doing. So if you want to do something like that, and if you really feel the passion for getting athletes ready, why not talk to somebody if you're like, hey, do you want to do a competition? I will coach you for free and see if this works, and, you know, kind of build up that reputation that you need to eventually maybe coach elite athletes.
Yeah, great advice. That. Thank you, Jacob. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Robin said sleep is probably a major factor in all client types. I think that's so true. I think you know, when I was a basketball player, or 15 to 20 years ago, nobody really cared about sleep. You know, they cared about, yeah, if the players go out partying and drinking and then coming to practice the next day. But I think, you know, if you really train on a high level with high volume and intensity, sleep is a major thing to look at in getting the best performance out of an athlete, which is coming more and more. You get more and more apps and coaches talk about, you know, sleep habits and stuff you need to look at when you recover. And sleep is still underestimated, even though it's a really big thing of training.
Thank you, Jacob. Robin, did you want to add anything to that at all?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Hi everyone, by the way. The reason why I put that is because, like, even in general populace, people always seem to just think that it's all right, I can only live on this amount, and it's just changing that perception and then actually getting them, like, when you start to then show them. I've just recently been tracking my own sleep and working on improving that, and the differences is massive. It's absolutely huge.
Mm.
And I think you can already feel the difference in like your everyday life, like going to work, and then just imagine the impact it has on athletes' performance that maybe train twice a day. Yeah, I agree. It's really, really important.
You can also use it a bit like like if you're doing weight loss and people watching the scales, and you can try and get them to track their food over a weekly basis rather than a daily basis type thing, right? You can do the same thing with the sleep, and I've found that works really well, so that they're not like beating themselves up if they have one bad night. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and I think that's what I meant with an holistic approach, that, you know, sleep then pretty quick leads to nutrition. When is the last time you eat before going to sleep? What do you eat before going to sleep to get the most out of you know, the recovery? And I think that's what a coach that's looking for somebody, or looking at somebody that wants to do a competition. It's not only about the performance, not only what happens in the gym or on the track, but a lot of stuff that happens around the actual training, you know.
Yeah. Thank you, Robin. Jacob, thank you ever so much. We've had a fantastic few weeks with yourself and Mintra. And I have to say, you've set the bar very high for any future educational stuff we do around fitness. I think you've really come at it, probably all of the sessions, you've come at it in a different way to what we might have expected. Even today, you've talked more about, the elements that aren't so obvious as we've just had there, sleep and recovery and that kind of thing. And the great suggestion that if you want to be a coach of competitive athletes, then volunteer to somebody and give it a go. And I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. So yeah, thank you ever so much, Jacob. I'm sure, everybody here is grateful for your fantastic input over the last few weeks. So round of applause for Jacob, everyone. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We enjoyed it a lot, and I think I don't know about the system in the UK, but in Germany, I've been in this industry for quite a while, and the way to get coaches certifications has changed dramatically in a worse way. So nowadays you can get online certifications, I think for 1,500 euros, and you're like a B level, A level, and a master personal trainer coach without ever having worked with an actual client. You just get it like on a piece of paper, and people are out there being like, I'm a highly certified coach. But my opinion is, you will only get your knowledge from, of course, you have to do a lot of research and reading and stuff, but working with people, you will get the most feedback out of this. And I think that's with everything in life. You get the most out of things that don't work, or clients criticizing you, or athletes criticizing you, being like, no, this didn't work at all, because then you start questioning yourself and then you get better. And this is kind of like why I approach it from this way, because I don't want to